journey beyond imposter syndrome. This is where I invite you into a space where high achievers and spiritual leaders converge to redefine success and self-worth. By sharing transformative stories and engaging with thought leaders, this podcast serves as a roadmap for navigating the complexities of imposter syndrome. It's an intimate look into overcoming personal barriers tailored for those who value wisdom, leadership, and intuition in business and life. Join me at the Humble Warrior podcast with Alani Bankhead. Hello, Humble Warriors. So today we're going to be talking about true generosity versus your imposter. So if this is your first time to the podcast, your imposter is something that you actually created to keep you safe. So your imposter syndrome is the function that tells you you're not good enough, you're not qualified, and here are all the reasons why, so that you don't take action, so that you don't crush your heart when things don't go the way that you want them to. So usually the top two reasons why your inner imposter is telling you you're not good enough is you're not smart enough and you're not educated enough, right? And the way it functions is the body is actually designed prehistorically to survive and not to thrive, right? So you've created this voice and it's constantly on the lookout for validation that it's right. So whether it's verbal feedback from somebody, even if 95% of it is good, if they give you any constructive feedback, you get a little bit butthurt by it. I know I've certainly been there. That's an indicator you have imposter syndrome. You might get a look or there's some body language, right? We're really good, those of us who have imposter syndrome, which by the way is 70% of us, we're really good at interpreting any body language as, oh my gosh, they don't like me, or oh my gosh, they're not happy, or there's something they're not actually saying. And our brain is constantly scanning, like I mentioned, for validation that the inner imposter is right. And as soon as it gets it, it says, see, you're not good enough. You weren't perfect. And these are all the reasons why you don't matter, because you're not perfect. Okay. So we've talked in the past about, we know that just in the self-help world, external validation is never gonna get you the life that you want. You have to learn how to validate yourself in order to heal your inner imposter. So what that means, practically speaking, is first deciding to make a switch from no longer allowing your imposter to be in charge and looking for validation that it's right. Instead, we want you to flip your brain to where it starts looking for evidence that you do have value, not because of what you do, but because you exist, right? You do actually matter. And the reality is that you're actually doing this with your money as well. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this because money is a tangible tool that we can use to uncover a lot of self-worth stuff. And this is what Joyful Money Club is all about, which the September cohort is open for registration right now. And so when it comes to your inner imposter and money, there are a lot of different ways it might show up. So one being, you might give generously because to a certain degree, it helps you fill that void of, I'm not good enough, so maybe I can use my money to receive some of that validation. Now, where I mentioned the title of this episode, which is true generosity versus your imposter, the truth is that oftentimes we conflate the two. So people who are listening to this podcast are very naturally humble, giving, very generous people. But because your imposter is running on subconscious all the time, it's kind of hijacked that generosity element of your personality, and it's doing what it needs to do to serve its own purposes. So if you have limiting beliefs like, I should be giving, right? That can really come into conflict with the genuine desire of, I want to help people, right? But some of the subtext that kind of comes into play is your imposter might be subconsciously telling you is, if you give this money, it's going to make you look like a generous person, which is going to prove your value to other people. And so that's why you should give, right? And so if any of you have ever felt a little bit icky after you gave some money, but weren't quite sure why, or may have been confused by it, this is an indicator that your imposter is running rampant in that area of your life as well. So, common behaviors according to studies in terms of imposter syndrome and how it classically shows up with money. So there's two really big ones. Number one is failing to ask for your worth in job interviews. Okay, so when you're applying for a job or interviewing for a job and they ask, what's your desired salary range? Your brain starts going into overdrive and you kind of panic a little bit and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I say? Oftentimes I'll get calls from people where they're super stressed because they don't want to overestimate their value, right? It's that game of finding the sweet spot. But oftentimes, people with imposter syndrome will undervalue their services, and it's hidden under the guise in their brains of, well, you want to be of service. It's not about the money, it's about the work, blah, 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 all that nonsense. But what happens when you undervalue yourself is that over time, you become resentful of the fact that they're not paying you your worth because you know what you bring to the table. So you might self sabotage or blow up your career at some point because you know that it's not a true win-win between your company and you. Okay. So, in a similar vein, asking for raises. If this is very difficult for you, that's an indicator that you're struggling with imposter syndrome. And so, while it's really nice on the surface, what you're actually saying is, I don't value myself. And you're not doing the work to understand your true worth. Because I can tell you right now, the majority of my clients, when they come to me, they don't understand their full value. And then learning the art of asking for the win-win so that you can validate yourself and know that others truly do see the value of your work, right? So when we talk about the purest elements of business and corporate, it's you're taking care of a problem, you're solving a problem for somebody, and people will exchange money for that so that they can solve their issue as quickly as possible, right? So the more people pay you, the more they're saying, you are so valuable to me. I'm willing to part with one of the most important things in my life so that I can get the solution that you're offering. And that feels really good. When you get paid, you show up much more powerfully because you're saying, oh my gosh, this is an equitable exchange of value. And I feel really good that finally somebody sees my worth, right? Now, another indicator you might be experiencing imposter syndrome is the following. So, if you're the person in the office, and I know if you're listening, you're the go to person, right? People have told you that you're the one that makes the magic happen, or your boss would be completely shit out of luck if you left, right? Or if you've ever left a job and you felt completely unappreciated and disrespected on your way out the door, despite everything that you did for that job, right? You're a very humble person, but you know deep down that you're really amazing at what you do. Okay. These are indicators that you're letting your inner imposter again lead and take charge when it comes to your work, career, and your finances. All right. Now, when we put that to the side and go back to who are you really as a person? Now, generosity does not have to be in one of your top 5 values, but humble warriors are very generous with the gifts that they have to offer the world, their time, their money, right? And so when we think about that best version of you in terms of when you can fully unleash your gifts from a place of overflow rather than a place of scarcity and lack, what does that look like? And so as you examine that, maybe you want to journal a little bit about, hey, if I had all the money and time in the world, what would I be doing? Who would I be doing it with? And how would I be using the resources at my disposal, right? Now we're tapping into some inner wisdom of what does the ideal situation look like? Now, many of you don't know how to do that, or if you're listening to this thinking, like, I don't actually know what the answer is. I'm sending you so much love today because I was once in that space too. And that also is a function of your inner imposter where you think that being of service is so valued that you will completely sacrifice your own well-being for the mission or for other people. And so why this is not particularly helpful is because we know that one of the behaviors of imposter syndrome is you are going to burn out at some point if you don't start learning how to undo those unhelpful mindsets and fill your cup. You're going to burn out, you're going to end up out of the job. You're going to blow your career up like I did. It needed to happen, to be honest. But what we want to do is we're not saying we don't want you to be service oriented, but we want you to be service oriented in a way that is most aligned with who you are. So realigning your behaviors with your true nature. And once you start practicing this, it's going to feel so good, you guys. And then you can start to scale up and amplify that as you practice what it's like to truly be yourself, right? And so some examples that I've personally experienced in this space. And I'm going to be really honest about these situations, and I'm going to talk about what I was thinking that I never said out loud. And the first one is actually with donating. And the example I want to share actually comes from tithing. So, you guys know that there's a big spiritual component to the work that I do. And you don't have to believe in God in terms of like a Christian God. I truly believe that God interacts with everybody differently. And the most important thing you can do is tap into that higher power and figure out, how was I created to interact with that? If you're really struggling with God right now, I totally get it. I've been there. And I would recommend that if you have to start with your soul, like your soul is a metaphysical element that you know is true, tap into yourself, right? Start there and then expand out as necessary. If you're into the trees, I know a lot of clients I have really resonate with like the trees and the ocean and the sky and stuff like that. And those are, I think, really important elements of connection and connectivity. So, with that being said, I subscribe to Christian beliefs. And so, tithing is a big part of what we do. And anybody who's been in a church is very aware of the feeling of the moment that the offering plate comes around, right? So when that offering plate would come around, all these emotions would jumble in me, even from when I was a little girl. It communicates that there's an expectation of you to give, first of all. And that feels kind of weird because it's like, shouldn't giving be because you want to, not because you're obligated to, right? And then the plate's coming around and you think, oh my gosh, what if I don't give, right? What if I honor where I am now? I'm not ready to give, or maybe I'm not in a financial position where I can give. And other people are going to see I'm going to pass that plate on with nothing in it. What will they think of me? Will they think that I'm not a good Christian? Will they think that I'm not generous? Am I being stingy, right? And then you start to ask yourself, what does that say about me if I'm not willing to tithe, right? Even if you have a really good intellectual understanding of what the mandates are with tithing, you start to apply that to yourself and what that says about you and your value and your character as a person. And then lastly, the question of, what does God think of you? God sees you, right? He sees you not putting money in that tithing plate. And you're a bad person because you're not doing that. And so there's all this stuff that comes up in the split second that plate comes around. And I dealt with that my whole life and never really addressed it. And so I had to do this really, really important work of healing all of that and really making some radical changes that a lot of maybe traditional Christians would not approve of. And it was kind of a whole thing to get to a place where I had to decide, I don't really care what other people think, and I can't. This has to be about a relationship between me and God first, right? And so those are the three parts that we're going to address for the rest of the podcast. So when it comes to true generosity versus your imposter dictating your giving habits, we're going to talk about healing the relationship with your higher power, whether it's God or your intuition, right? Healing the relationship with yourself, but then healing your relationship with other people. And money plays into each and every single one of those. So, when it comes to my healing journey of tithing, so we're talking about my healing relationship with God. So, the Bible says, like, you should tithe. And for those who don't know what tithing is, it says that for all the money that you receive, you should give back to God 10% of that money. And good Christians do this, right? You hear people on the pulpit all the time talking about that. You have some pastors that are very well known for abusing that edict and buying private jets and all kinds of crazy stuff. But the reality was that I had to come to a place of understanding that I didn't really want to give the money. And even though I was writing the check, I wasn't doing it from a place of joy. And I knew that for me, that was inherently wrong. And so I prayed about it. I prayed about it and I did my research, right? So I went to the texts that I say govern how I live, and I did some research about what it said about money. And there were a couple of key phrases or Bible verses that I found. And again, if you are not a Christian, totally cool. Take these as parables and take the learning points as you will. I'm not trying to proselytize here, but Second Corinthians 9:7 was verse 1, and it says, each of you should give what you've decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So what this is saying is you really shouldn't give because you feel forced to give. God really wants you to give because you're excited to give and you love God, and this feels like a very loving act. So that was number one. And when I filtered my thoughts through that verse, what I realized was I wasn't cheerful in any way, shape, or form. And my relationship with tithing and myself really came down to what I was taught as a young girl by society, that I really only had value if I was a good girl and if I was achieving. So if I was doing my to-do list of achievement and doing all the right things, then I was a good person. And if I wasn't doing those things, I was a bad person. But this verse was clearly saying, God doesn't want me to give because I should give. God wants me to give because I want to give. And that was kind of a game changer for me. And then the other verses that came up, so there's a story in Mark 12 of the widow. So it's verses 41 to 40. And it talks about Jesus was sitting in the area where the offerings were being put in this church, and he was watching the crowd putting their money into that collection plate. And rich people threw in large amounts of money, right? And a lot of people like to show off how generous they are. But then this poor widow came by and put in two very small copper coins worth only a few cents, is what the Bible says. And calling to his disciples, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything she had to live on." And really, what this is saying is, it's not saying that Jesus wants you to give everything you have, even though some people do misinterpret and manipulate the scripture to say that so they can get as much money as possible from people. What I interpreted this verse to say was, it was about the posture of her heart. She had only these couple of coins worth very little, and she offered it up, right? Unfortunately, we don't have any insight as to what this woman was thinking at the time that she gave it, but we know the cognitive triangle says thoughts lead to emotions lead to behaviors. So when I think about what kind of place does someone have to be in that they love God so much that they give all they have and say, "Thank you so much for what I have. I'm giving back." It just honestly chokes me up a little bit thinking about it, because ultimately it's about the posture of her heart, right? So the posture of this woman's heart, God loving a cheerful giver from Second Corinthians, this all led me down this rabbit hole where I realized also that God doesn't actually need your money. Like, if you believe that God created everything in the universe, including us, that means he created all of the money. And one story I like to share about abundance is, if you haven't had the luxury of being able to travel outside of the United States, you really don't know what an incredible gift it is to be American. Because I've been to many countries through my military and law enforcement service where literally how you're born will dictate how much money you make, what economic bracket you're going to be in, and you have zero control in or out of it. So the fact that we live in America where you can come here with nothing and become a billionaire, not that it's about the billions, right? But in America, you can really become whatever you want if you're willing to work for it. And so bringing that back to the idea that in America, you can really make your own money. We literally print money. That's what the federal government does, right? So do you think that God is capable of creating more abundance for you? Yes. Do you think that God needs your money? No. The whole intent behind tithing is to show your gratitude and the love that you have for what God has given you. That's my interpretation. And at the end of the day, God wants your heart. So I had to do a lot of work, and this is a big one for those of you experiencing imposter syndrome, which is understanding that my value and status with God does not change if I give or not. Right? So undoing the lie that what mattered was being obedient, when really the truth is what matters really is the relationship between you and God. And once I understood that for myself, I was able to start dismantling all the unhelpful money behaviors from there. And honestly, I stopped giving in church for, I can't exactly remember how long it was. I want to say it was between 18 months and 2 years of no giving. And at the time, I was going to church basically every Sunday, unless I was doing an operation or something like that over a weekend. And I would show up, I would go through the discomfort of that collection plate coming around, And I remember just praying to God and saying, I am sorry that the posture of my heart is one that I don't want to give, but that's the most honest space for me to be in. And I am asking you, God, to change my heart. Like, I've done everything possible to be a good girl and shift my perspective and want to give from a joyful place. But the reality was that I didn't want to. And I knew that my heart was misaligned, and I knew that I could not do that heart surgery myself. That was something I had to go to God with and ask for help with. And to be honest, it was pretty risky, and I was a little bit scared, right? Because I was stepping out of the norm of my behaviors and saying, I'm not going to be a good girl anymore, but I think that God is calling me to more. And so I was pretty scared. And I feel myself getting a little bit emotional about it because I know that there's someone listening to this who feels the same way. And I want you to know that God loves you, not because of what you give, but because of who you are. And so after 18 months or 2 years, however long it took, I remember it was like I woke up one day and my heart just completely changed. Like all of a sudden, I wanted to give in abundance. When that collection plate would come, I would write that check or give that cash. And I just remembered like the love coming out for the gratitude I have for everything that I was given. And it was really wild and fun to see that miracle happen because I can't tell you when I flipped the switch. It literally was like I woke up one morning and I was healed of it. But it took me almost 2 years of literally every Sunday being like, sorry, I'm not giving today. Like, I don't want to, but please help me like change my heart, right? And so that was the beginning of my healing in terms of the relationship between myself and God. So for you, what thoughts or questions is this bringing up in terms of what stuff is a barrier between you and God and you having a closer connection with God that you're maybe a little bit resentful about? Okay. So next up, I want to talk about healing our money relationships with other people. And I'm going to use family as an example because it can be one of the most difficult examples, right? We love our families, or maybe we don't. Maybe we have really difficult families, but family can be really complicated. So, again, going back to who I am at my core, I'm a very generous person. And I realized I had to do all kinds of, undo all kinds of limiting beliefs around what I thought about money and family and generosity. And so, especially in some culturally driven contexts. So I'm Hispanic, and Hispanic families in particular are really well known for supporting multi-generational efforts, right? Like there's kind of a general sense that like the younger generations should help the older generations. And this caused some cultural conflict for me growing up because while I'm Hispanic, I was raised in the United States, which is very ruggedly individualistic. While multicultural or not, sorry, multifamily homes are becoming more common because of the economic situation right now, traditionally, it's expected the child leaves the house and then you go fly your independent self. Whereas in Hispanic families, that's not usually the case. Like they want you to be connected and very tied and enmeshed with each other. And so my parents divorced, and I love both of my parents very, very much. They divorced, and I joined active duty not that long after. And, my mom was left as a single parent. And I gave money to support in that way. And I loved doing that. Like, I loved being in a position where I could support, right? So that's one example where you can give from a place of love and gratitude, right? There's another family member where, things shifted a little bit. So when I was on my first deployment, I created an if I don't die fund, right? So, which I know sounds a little bit morbid, but it is what it is. So I would put aside a little bit of money every month with this goal to buy this very high ticket item that I normally would not buy for myself. But, we get tax-free money, we get hazard fire or imminent danger pay and stuff like that in the military. So I was putting my little bit of money aside for this thing. And when I got back from the desert, I felt my intuition or the Holy Spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, telling me, actually, I want you to use that fund to pay for a car for someone. And the cool thing about it was, remember we talk about emotions being indicators, right? I was so looking forward to buying that really expensive thing for myself, but hearing this inner knowing that actually you're going to pay for this car brought me a lot of peace and joy. And I knew it was right because if I was really honest, I selfishly wanted that money for myself. So to have this piece was an incredible gift. And so I paid for this car. And over time, like what I really started to see though was this individual, it wasn't just the car, it was other stuff, right? So they asked for more money and I gave and I gave and I gave, and it frankly was never enough. Now, I want to acknowledge that I believe this person was doing their very best, but because of their own trauma, they were bleeding out onto me and I was allowing it to happen. And I remember being super frustrated and resentful because it really got to a point where they expected me to pay for their stuff. And I didn't think it was right, but I also realized I was the one who allowed that to happen. But the other light bulb that went off for me during this experience was I realized that this was exactly how my imposter syndrome operated. It was never satisfied, ever. It didn't matter how much affirmation I got, the kudos, the awards, the promotions, nothing. My imposter was never happy and it was sucking the life out of me. And I, in turn, was sucking the life out of the people who loved me, who wanted to support me when I allowed my imposter to lead. Whether it was wanting affirmation from my husband, always seeking the gold star from my boss, like I knew that I was good, but when was I going to be content with myself? Right. And so I knew I had to learn how to become content, and I wasn't quite sure how to do it then. I know now. Right. And that's what I share in my coaching work, whether it's the book or Joyful Money Club or one on one coaching. But the reality was that I knew in order to become content, I had to first affirm and recognize within myself that I was doing the best I could, but that I had to put my oxygen mask on first. And that meant putting up new boundaries with this person to honor my energy and time, which were non renewable resources at the time. And I'll never forget, I had a very difficult conversation in the E ring of the Pentagon. So the E ring is the outermost ring of the Pentagon. And I just remember kind of going off on this person because they were demanding money out of me. And I was trying very graciously to explain to them that that wasn't going to happen and they weren't listening. And I'm sure people were walking past me kind of thinking, like, what is happening with this chick on the phone? But long story short, so this individual, remember, I bought them a car. And about 3 years later, they totaled the car. So this car was 1 year old when I bought it. So it was 4 years old when they totaled it. And first, they were surprised that I paid for the car in cash. So I own the title free and clear. Actually, they owned it, it was in both of our names. And I signed over the title to them. They got the payout from the insurance company. It was about, I don't know, $7,800 at that point. And I told them, I was like, hey, take this money and buy another car with it. And they were like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to get rental cars. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do when the rental cars, that money dries up? Like, what are you going to do then? And I knew deep down they were going to expect me to buy them another car. And I just wasn't going to do that. So I said, hey, this is the money you're getting. This is it for a vehicle. Whatever you choose to do with it is on you. You can come up with other funding sources to get a new car, but this is it for me. I think one free car for me is more than enough, right? And so this was a difficult boundary that I had to set, and they were not happy with me, and they still aren't happy with me about it, but that's okay. So, what this also taught me was a key phrase that I use a lot, which is I would rather you feel guilty than resentful. And especially humble warriors, because you're so service oriented, you want to give and give and give. And anytime you have to say no, you're going to feel bad. And the reality is that that's probably never going to go away because you're such a loving person. But just like going to the gym, if you start practicing disappointing other people for the right reasons, that muscle is going to get stronger and stronger. And now, I mean, with very few exceptions, I have zero problems telling people no. And there are some times when I still feel a little bit guilty. And I know that that's okay because I know that if I had said yes, I would feel resentful. And dishonoring myself first means that I'm going to bleed out into other people, right? I have another story for you guys. And so we talked a little bit about healing relationships with God. This is healing ourselves through the process. But when it comes to friends, same thing. So I have had a couple of friends whom I love dearly, right? And I do believe that like some friends are meant to last you a lifetime and some only last a short period of time. And that doesn't mean that those friendships aren't any less impactful. Um, but there was one particular friend I had for years, and they're a wonderful human being. I love them to pieces to this day. And I felt like, and this is my perspective, right? They could have a completely different perspective. I don't know. But I felt like I was there for them when they were going through some really hard things professionally. And, I was bringing the wine, we're doing girls' nights, like lots of hugs and tearful nights and stuff like that. But the one moment that I needed them to be there for me, they not only blew me off, but were very dismissive of what I was experiencing. And I remember it took me a while to untangle the emotions and the thoughts of what was happening. And I finally went back to them one last time because, again, like I love to assume the benefit of the doubt. I love this person. I wanted to maintain the friendship. And what it came down to was I went back to them and I said, hey, just because I'm not as expressive as you are about my hurts does not mean that my emotions aren't just as deep, right? And I need you to acknowledge that I have had adversity thrown my way too. Your adversity is not any worse than my adversity. It's all adversity. Can we just help each other out? And this person maintained their position that their hurts were worse than my hurts. And at that point, I was like, if you can't even empathize with my situation, then like this is not a mutually beneficial friendship. Have a good life. And while that's not specifically money related, time and energy are currencies, okay? And I don't regret the love and attention and support that I gave this person. But what I'm saying is that remember, like one step up from compassion is peace. And compassion energy is all about service. It's all about you. I put myself last, right? You win, I lose is the core statement. When we think about peace, the core thought around peace is we all win or we don't play this game. So when it comes to time and energy in friendships, they're not necessarily required to be equal, right? That's 50-50, but they do need to be equitable in order for a win-win to occur. So sometimes you have to give a little bit more when they need it. Sometimes they have to give a little bit more when you need it. But for me, when that wasn't happening, I realized that it really was more of a one-sided relationship where they were taking. Again, I'm not saying they're bad, but that was the reality and I had to let go of that relationship. So again, like this is a resource, not money specifically, but this is how the inner imposter can drive us to put ourselves last in all of our relationships to our own detriment. I had another friend, again, super love her. She's amazing. But I would offer all my best gifts and she would take them, right? And I love her to pieces. But the reality was that she reneged on a lot of stuff a lot of the time. So we were both military at the time. She was in a different part of the country and we had agreed that she was going to come to my place for Thanksgiving one year after all the times that I traveled to her. And last minute she reneged. She's like, no. And then I found out that she went to one of her airmen's houses. And I could tell it was because she really enjoyed the validation that she got from this other subordinate, which I'm not saying is bad. But what I'm saying is that it was really hurtful that I was the one expending my time and energy getting on planes and spending money to pour into this relationship and it wasn't reciprocated. And so, really, I don't think she meant to do this, but the friendship was only valid when it was convenient for her. And the straw that broke the camel's back for me was I was actually in the middle of an operation. There was an emergent situation with a missing child, and this girl was at very high risk of being sexually abused. And we were working around the clock. And I think we were about 48 hours into this op, and I was running on very little sleep. And I got a voicemail from her where she was berating me because I wasn't there for her for some reason. And she did not ask, did not care that I was in the middle of trying to find this kid. And sure, I could have communicated that, but I think the point was there was no grace and it was only that taking, right? So that inner imposter, that inner voice that was saying, you need to give to me. And when you don't give to me the way that I want it, I lash out and I get hyper emotional. And after that, I was like, oh, I'm so done with this. Like, when it comes to a missing child at risk of being abused and like your feelings, the kid's gonna win out every time. And so I wish both of those friends well, but as painful as those experiences were, on the flip side was it opened up time, space, and energy for me to build new friendships that were mutually beneficial and equitable, where people truly cared about my well-being as much as I cared about theirs. And so I bring this back to a key question for you. So we've been talking a lot about financial resources, but also time and energy resources. So when you think about your relationships with other people or your work or family, are you giving to them because you want to give? Or are you giving to them because it's out of obligation? And we know that oftentimes our behaviors and our emotions dictate what might be the subconscious thought that we're having. So for me, whenever I would give and I really didn't want to give, I would experience a little bit of tightness in my chest, like not a whole lot, but my heart pace would quicken. And when I think back on those situations, deep down, I knew that my intuition was like, no, you don't need to be giving to this. Like, there are other people who want to give. Like, those resources that you have to be allocated elsewhere, right? But ultimately, what this points us to is the shame, right? So, if I gave from a place of obligation, it would invoke shame in my body, which is what your inner imposter does. This is where shame lives, and it forces you into behaviors that you don't want to. So, me breaking that cycle by saying, I'm not giving unless I absolutely want to, was the first step to really changing my life with respect to how I allocate resources. What we want to replace shame ultimately with is grace. So we talked about number one, understanding your personal spiritual belief system around just life in general and how money plays into that. So it's kind of like, you guys know I like a good gardening analogy, but spiritual weeding. If you think about your life as this fertile soil and you want to grow crops or flowers or something really abundant and beautiful, right? You have to make sure you're starting with good soil. And that's what your spiritual belief system is, right? And then you have to fertilize it and water it, right? And so that means investing in that relationship at the truest level. If you see weeds popping up, or if you have pests and you're not addressing that stuff, it's going to choke the joy out of your garden. So when we have these unhelpful thoughts, those are the equivalents of those weeds that I was talking about, such as I have to give, right? My spiritual practice says I'm required to give. That's a spiritual weed because it's not coming from a place of love or joy. We got to pull that one out. And when you pull that out, it gives that soil time to heal so that the good stuff can grow and thrive. And also, the more you develop this inner knowing, the better resource you're going to have to refer to when you do experience doubt. So oftentimes, and this happens to me all the time, I might come to a crossroads where I have a values conflict, and then I have to go back to like, okay, what do I actually believe? What did I decide a long time ago I believed? And then I remember, oh, right. And then I can make decisions accordingly. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have my moments of, oh my gosh, what if I'm doing the right thing? God, please, y'all, I would really encourage you to get rid of that because that's just like spiritual hemming and hawing. In my economy, I truly believe that like my job is to seek God out, do my best in making the right decisions. And even if it's an imperfect decision, I think God can still work through it and fix it if needed. Now, here's the other thing. When it comes to acknowledging your true worth, right? We're talking about like proverbial worth and financial worth. We're going to do a little bit of real talk because we know that you, humble warrior, are a total badass. Okay. Maybe you don't like to talk about it out loud, but you know that deep down, even though you walk a very fine line between humility and like showing up powerfully, you know that you're the best at what you do. Okay. And I firmly believe that it's not an accident that you were created in this season. There have been trillions of humans that have ever existed, and all of a sudden, you in 2025 are here, and there's never been one of you. There's never going to be another one of you. I personally think God created you to win the gold medal of the Olympic sport of whatever sport you're meant to be in, right? And so, if you believe that to be true, how would you actually behave at work? And how would you actually behave with your money? Okay. I want to use an example to illustrate this as well because it actually reminded me of when I would run operations. So, my job is to bring the right teams together and create environments where people feel really comfortable in sharing their gifts. But what I really look for in people on my teams is to have a balance and be able to walk the line of humility and confidence. Yes, you're a humble person of service. Yes, we know that you understand you're deeply flawed. However, when push comes to shove and the mission has to get done, I want you to be able to say, and I'm the best at what I do. No question. I dare you to find somebody that's better than me. Truly. And I think you and I both know, even if you're at the very beginning of your imposter syndrome healing journey, we both know that you're amazing and you're the best at what you do. Okay. So DM me or send me an email, Alani at Mighty Sparrow Coaching, and tell me about how incredible you are at your job. And I'll celebrate you because we all need a team to cheer us on. All right. And so when you understand that, like, I don't show up as powerfully, nor am I creating the impact I want by cowering back and hiding from my true value and my true power. That's not helping anybody, which is the opposite of what you want to do. Okay. The next thing is understanding the needs that you have to blossom in relationship with God, with yourself, and with other people. Are you always the giver of money and time? Because if you are, then you need to reconsider making it more equitable because you have needs too. Like you're a human being, even though I know you're Superman or Superwoman, which I love, but you have needs too. Okay. So when we go flip the switch, we talked a lot about what fake humility looks like and what fake generosity, or maybe not altruistic generosity, looks like. True generosity is giving from a place of overflow. And I have to admit, today I felt very challenged because I have been hiding from you guys a little bit on this, and I didn't realize it until today. So I used to have a limiting belief that I shouldn't publicize any of my donations because you hear people talk about, oh, like people who put on social media what they donate to or on their websites, they're just virtue signaling and they're just doing that stuff to appear very generous. And I also had a limiting belief that it was always better to do stuff in secret. It's a real flex to do things behind the scenes. And I think there's a time and a place for all of that stuff. But the reality is that if I'm here as the example of what life after overcoming imposter syndrome looks like, but I'm not telling you what I'm doing, then I'm really not setting the best example for you guys. So I posted about this earlier today, and this podcast isn't going to get aired for a minute, but I got a check from a court hearing that I did. So jurisdictions will pay per diem if you come out to testify, right? Because you got gas and food and stuff like that. So I went to testify on a child exploitation case in another jurisdiction, and I received this per diem check. And I decided to donate it to an organization that I really love and appreciate. It's called Free to Fly. If you guys are not following Free to Fly or Yolanda Christensen, I highly encourage you to go check them out. I'm very picky about who I vouch for. And I've actually donated to Free to Fly before because Free to Fly is one of the very few anti-trafficking organizations that I see that really walks the talk. In fact, Free to Fly is such a humble organization. They barely market their stuff. And the reality is that some of the bigger organizations that make the millions of dollars, it's because they have amazing marketing machines, but their leaders are actually narcissistic pricks. So I'm not saying that's all of them, but folks in the anti-trafficking space, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Okay. So when it comes to donations, we do a lot of donating in my family because we are naturally generous people. This is something my husband and I have talked about. We love to give to causes that are very, very important to us. And I partly give because I'm fed up with amazing nonprofits not getting the resources they need, right? Because they feel uncomfortable in their marketing because they have their own imposters to deal with. And so this money came to me, and older me would have like kept it, right? I would have hoarded it a little bit. I would have put it in my savings account. But my relationship with money is healed enough that when money comes to me, I now literally ask it and I check in with God and I'm like, where do you want to go? So I treat it like a person and I'm like, where do you want to go? And my intuition was like, send it to Free to Fly. And I still remember the first donation I made to Free to Fly. It was not that much money. I think it was like $30 or something like that. Like it was a very specific percentage of money that had come in. And I sent Yolanda a note and I was like, I'm sorry, this isn't as much as I want, but like my imposter was working. Like my offering of love was not good enough. And I was making excuses for it. And she was so gracious. She was like, oh my gosh, no, we're so thankful. Like most people would never donate, right? Like she was very kind about it. And my husband and I had come to a place of understanding like if we only give on a small scale to begin with, but want to grow that, we can, right? And so my donations have grown over time, thankfully, because my income has increased a lot. And being able to give from that place of gratitude feels so good. And I personally feel God and the Holy Spirit in me telling me this money has to go here, this money has to go there, or do something different with it, right? So whether it's you have a lot of money and you want to give from a place of love and you can do that, right? Awesome, do it. If you can only pay overdue school lunches $5 at a time, that is a couple of meals that some kid can have because of you. If you're starting your joyful money journey and you're in a lot of debt and you're trying to get out of debt and you're throwing every available dollar towards debt, donate your time, right? I had a friend not that long ago who's starting a business. And when I tell you guys, this woman does not realize how amazing she is. She's starting to wake up to it, thankfully. But the reality is, I can't make her see how awesome she is, even if I tell her because her imposter's in overdrive. But I can show her with my actions how loved she is. And so I will donate my time to helping her start her business because I believe in her and what she's trying to do so bad, right? I had a Joyful Money Club client recently message the group and say, oh my gosh, like we're moving houses. And I hired someone off of like Craigslist or something to come do the house cleaning. And this family showed up, and this woman was literally cutting my grass with scissors because they couldn't afford the lawnmower. And my client went out and was like, stop doing that. And she was sharing how her heart broke a little bit over the fact that she could tell that this family was struggling and they were doing this work. They were frankly undervaluing their work. But when I asked her, hey, if you'd had the abundance, right? Like if you were finally out of debt and you had your oxygen mask on and you had the money to be able to give, what would you have done differently? And she's like, I would have given them a bigger tip, right? And so I told her, I was like, this is not about beating yourself up because of what you couldn't do. It's about imagining what you will do when you put your oxygen mask on, when you understand your value to say, I don't need to be in debt, right? I was not created to be in debt. I was created for a life of abundance and joy and thriving and sharing and generosity. And so I said, okay. And so one day you will. I want you to know one day you're going to be a fat tipper for people. You are going to provide so much hope and encouragement to people. And in fact, this was something that I did the last couple of summers. So, because of how busy I was with work, I actually outsourced and helped or hired people to come help me weed, even though you guys know I love weeding. That is 100% my jam. That's my therapy. And God brought me a couple people. One of them was a college student who wanted to be a pilot in the military. And hello, I'm in the Air Force. Like this guy had no ties to the military. And do you think it was an accident that God brought that person to me so that I could speak life into them about them becoming a pilot? Because the reality was this person saying, I'm just a kid from Montana. Like, on what planet do I have becoming a pilot? And I, with the wisdom and knowledge I have, get the chance to tell him, actually, there's a pilot shortage. They're pretty desperate for pilots. Have you seen the bonuses? They're really, really fat. And somebody has to put their hand up and say, I will do it. And the only person stopping you from doing that is you. And having that moment to mentor this young man, and then next summer have him show up again because I needed a little bit of help moving some stuff around the yard, and him telling me, this is my plan. Here's what I'm doing. I have backups. And it just brought me so much joy that I had the opportunity to share some knowledge with him, someone who's very, very deserving. There was another person that we hired, and this woman, oh my gosh, her imposter syndrome was so rampant. And I got to sit with her for hours pulling weeds, just talking to her about what I know about imposter syndrome and her true value, right? And do I know the ultimate impact of my words? I don't. But man, I would love one day, it would be a pinch me moment to get a picture from that college student of him in a cockpit of military jet. Like that would mean so much to me, right? It would mean so much to me to get a note from this person and say, because of the life that you spoke over me, that one day while we were pulling weeds, I decided that I was worth better than the life I was allowing for myself, right? Oh, those are the pinch me moments. I don't expect them, but when they come, I just relish them, right? So, all that to say, bringing it back to the conversation, I want you guys to remember that this is a whole journey, right? So, your imposter syndrome demands perfection. And the first time you try and don't do as well as you think you should, your imposter is going to say, see, more evidence. You shouldn't have even tried. You're not good at this, right? It's just like going to the gym. The first time is awful, but then it gets better the more you show up. You have to be consistent, right? And you need to continue practicing stepping into your worthiness over and over again, right? Imagine what it would be like. The person that I want to become, if I was them, what would that feel like? What would I be doing? What would I be eating? Who would I be spending time with, right? And practicing with your money is another great tangible tool to get those reps in, right? So, when does it feel good to keep your money? That is us putting our oxygen mask on. So, it might feel good to keep your money to pay debt off, to have an emergency fund, to save 3 to 6 months of expenses, to have FU money, which you should Google the term. It's really amazing, right? But having that financial independence and security to know that if my boss ever asks me to do anything illegal, unethical, or immoral, I can quit because I have a financial safety net. That's your oxygen mask. That feels really good, right? So when does it feel good to keep your money? Oxygen mask. When does it feel good to give it away? That's overflow. So when I feel led to see a situation and say, oh my gosh, I want to donate to that, right? God has given us so much. I'm so thankful for it. And I feel led to give in this way. That's overflow. That's from that place of love. So getting really familiar with, is this an oxygen mask moment or is it an overflow moment? And they're both good. They're both necessary. Even now, I have moments of both, right? Whew, we covered a lot of material today, you guys, but I hope that this was encouraging to you. So I am bringing this up because Joyful Money Club registration is open. Our next cohort starts Wednesday, September 24th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern time for my American cohort folks. And for my European clients, it's 1 to 2:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. I do have folks on both sides of the Atlantic that I get the incredible privilege to work with. And so if you want to register, go to www.joyfulmoneyclub.com. There's all kinds of testimonials all over my social media about it. It really has been such a pleasure to work with these folks. So this iteration is going to be a little bit different because we have a virtual course to go along with it. We are beta testing it. It is $49 a month for 90 minutes of group coaching. Plus you get tech support and this virtual class. Guys, the price is going up. It's just I'm working through the kinks. So if you're like, ooh, $49 is a lot, the price is going to go up because I know the value that I give is a lot more than $50 a month. But guys, if you feel so led and you're just struggling to commit with the finances, that might be a function of your imposter. Hopefully you gain some wisdom or awareness around it. But ultimately, if this is going to serve you to put your oxygen mask on, I would be so honored to get to support you on this journey. Until next time, humble warriors, please remember the world needs who you were made to be. Thank you for joining us today on this journey to discover how you can harness your imposter syndrome to work for you. I love you. We'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this episode and would like some help overcoming your imposter syndrome, check out the free life purpose exercise on my website and subscribe to my blog. If you already know what your life purpose is and are ready to crush or harness your imposter syndrome, then you're gonna love my best-selling book, The Least of Us: How Your Weakness Points to Your Greatest Power, available on Amazon and all major book retailers. Or you can hit me up at Alani at mightysparrowcoaching.com to discuss private coaching or corporate and government training. That's ALANI at mightysparrowcoaching.com. Listen, there's only ever been one you, and there will only ever be one you. And you have a specific gift to give that the world desperately needs. Don't let your self-doubt be the thing preventing you from living your most joyful and impactful life. Until next time, I'm always cheering you on.